Hello everyone, it's Ashwin Rao, and in today's video I'm bringing you my collection of vintage Florsheim Royal Imperial Longwing Blucher gunboats. Florsheim, historic American shoemaker, recently really has fallen in ill regard because they largely make cemented shoes these days, but from the 1940s and 50s through the 1980s, Florsheim was standing tall right there with brands such as Alden and at the time Allen Edmonds to really make some really classic, fantastic shoes. Their most iconic model is this longwing Blucher model, of which you see three separate styles here. This one here, different colorway here, and different colorway here. And the other model I have here is a rare split-toe derby that actually was made in very small quantities. It seems that in that era, Florsheim had a large catalog, particularly in the 1930s and 40s, showcasing a wide range of styles. Royal Imperials were the highest level of manufacture and featured V-cleat here, the 5 nails, and that really distinguishes the Royal Imperial line with its upper level bottoming work. Florsheim was largely a welted footwear manufacturer through much of its history until the 1980s, and much of its production was based in the United States using a wide range of tanneries that were producing high quality leathers at this time. These are largely chrome tanned leathers. Veg tan leathers were not as popular amongst these types of shoes, and so these are shoes for pro or con that have maintained their color signature, their quality, their luster, their handle. And the only model that isn't necessarily fully chrome tanned is this model of shell cordovan longwing Bluchers that we'll talk about, that I've restored and had its sole replaced. To give credit where credit is due, Wyatt and Dad, cobblers based out of the East Coast here in the United States, were able to do some resoles because I wanted to have a rubber sole for the environment which I live in, which is in the Pacific Northwest, which is heavily rainy. The leather soles don't always hold up as well in the rain. So let's start with the longwing Blucher shell cordovan model. This is Horween shell cordovan in its deep burgundy signature, also known as color 8. Now, color 8 has gone through a number of evolutions. This particular version, which was, I believe, from the 1950s and 60s range, 1950s in this case, had almost more deep brown undertones that when this leather was not conditioned and dried out, it almost looked like a brown shell cordovan. But I used a number of pure polish products, including their neutral cream polish, their high shine polish, which I absolutely adore. This is a product you really need to be thinking about if you want to get a good shine, to restore some of the color and integrity. And what you get here is a near new looking shoe that is essentially 70 years old. Now, granted, the outsole stitching and the welt were revised by Wyatt and Dad to create this Dr. sole. And other than that, the shoe has the same last, the same shape, the same upper, high quality. Shell cordovan, once you've conditioned it, just needs the occasional brushing with a horsehair brush to regain much of its luster. So this is the 93605 model, which you can get widely available. This is a great entry point for shell cordovan for those of you who are interested in shell cordovan, because Florsheim made a ton of 93605 models in color 8 shell cordovan in that era. And you can still get a high quality used pair that is 50 or 60 years old for around $100, sometimes even less, sometimes a little bit more. And depending on the quality and how clean this is, this was a fairly used model. You can see from the slight discolorations along the rolls here that shoe wasn't always kept in a shoe tree. I had to work pretty aggressively using David Levin's Shell Vedge's ebony stick done by Dapper Woodworks, as well as some of the polishing creams to smooth out those rolls. And I always use shoe trees to maintain the integrity of the shoes once they are not on my feet. So you can see how beautiful this came out using those pure polish products and the ebony stick, all designed for shell cordovan. And I'm really happy with this specific era color of shell cordovan, which I mentioned Comes to some degree from the formulation of the shell cordovan and to some degree from the aging, the fading, the exposure to sunlight that this shoe has obtained over many years, which has created a slightly different lightening effect on the shell. But beautiful color, really versatile color, and a great entry point in a classic design that almost any enthusiast of heritage footwear, of classic dress wear should own a long-wing blucher. This is a perfect crossover shoe. And when I do a video of shoes that are, really accessible or interesting or should be interesting to boot enthusiasts, you should really go no further than the long-wing blucher style. And Florsheim makes the most iconic style. So if you go in the used market, you're going to find a great pair. And then you just work on it with a little bit of elbow grease and the conditioner of your choice, and you're going to get something like this. This here is a 93602 model, which is a mid-brown, almost orange-brown colored grained leather. You can see it's got this slight hatch grain-like effect. I believe this is a similar grain to alpine grain. Well, this model was from the 1970s, and as you can see, beautiful handle, beautiful aging, really not much creasing, and the shoe just really holds itself up well. Again, Wyatt and Dad, cobblers extraordinaire, replaced the welt stitching here and the welt itself. Gave me a new welt and a cleaner stitch pattern with a contrast stitch to accentuate the shoe. And I think that for a couple $100 or more, depending on how much you want to spend, you can really get a nice rubber sole applied to such a common model and not feel like you are essentially ruining a vintage pair because you're replacing some of its inherent properties. A little bit of pure polish love, you're going to get a beautiful luster and shine. Speaking of beautiful lusters and shine, I wanted to show the shine on the tip of this shoe. The long-wing blucher has this nice pinking pattern, which is this serration of the edge of the wingtip, as well as serration along the side paneling here and the long wing pattern here. You only don't see serration along the back heel counter and leather piece right back here, but pretty much every other part of the shoe, other than the insets of the facing here, have that serration. Here the insets have a piping effect that wraps around the edge of the collar of the shoe, but you can see serration here. That is a classic feature of many American-made shoes, is that serration. Gives it a little bit more of a casual look, but really speaks to the quality of production and what you're getting in this pair of shoes. This is an extensively brogued shoe that can fit the modern workplace environment as a semi-formal or even formal wear. The brown makes it a little less formal. The contrast stitching, which is a darker brown or black stitching on the upper, also reduces the formalities. This model here is their 93631 model. Their 93631 model is a fairly rare colorway for the Florsheim Longwing Blucher. This is the Golden Harvest model, which was largely produced in the 1960s and 70s. In this case, I'll point out the beautiful medallion, this classic fleur-de-lis style medallion. Here you see the contrast stitching. I'm not sure if this stitching was initially painted dark like the welt or if that came out as I've cleaned things up, but I cleaned the shoe and revealed this light colored stitch, which I think looks really good against the dark welt and adds, again, a little bit of informality here to this beautiful pattern and 93631 Golden Harvest model. So these are going to be more expensive on the market. If you're looking for them used, think around $200 to $300 to even $400. I think I got mine for about $200 and cleaned it up. Here it has its original sole, and you can see how well that stitching, even after 50 years, has maintained itself. I believe this is a replaced heel block because I have not seen this heel block pattern with this nailed V-cleat styled pattern. I think this was not the original heel block, but that's okay. This is the original remainder of the footbed here, where you have the Florsheim Royal Imperial stamp. The edges of the leather are almost darkened and go along with this contrast stitching to create a really highly contrasted appearance to this shoe. This mustard yellow, some people love it, some people hate it. I find that it works really well with neutral colors such as mid or dark browns, as well as with certain grays. It'll give you a little color pop in your wardrobe depending on how you choose to use it. Beautiful model again. So beautiful model, beautiful medallion, tremendous pinking detail with this very even, symmetric broguing, classic of the longwing Bluchers of that era. Now, speaking of other longwing Bluchers, a number of other manufacturers made longwing Bluchers with various styles and proportions to their wingtip. Some of them had joints here between the facing as well as the side paneling and the vamp of the shoe. I like that there is no spacing. There's no cut right here. Carmina actually currently makes a little cut right there, which allows them to be more efficient in their use of smaller pieces of, say, shell cordovan if they're making this type of model. But I really like the cleanliness of this design. Other brands of the era that were making longwing Bluchers, obviously Alden, which is still making this model in a very similar proportion, Nettleton, Hanover, John McHale, Dax, a number of different Canadian brands like Hart's. There's a large range of longwing Bluchers out there. Allen Edmonds makes their McNeil model, which has a lengthened side paneling that kind of almost hits this longwing Blucher pattern. I don't think that's as elegant of a pattern. It feels a little bit more elongated. My favorite pattern is this pattern, followed by closely the Hanover and Alden patterns. The final pair in my vintage is one that I've recently showcased on my channel, which is this very rare 92616 hand-sewn apron split toe derby in this black colorway. This is a split toe derby because it's got a split along the toe, shockingly named, as well as this hand-sewn apron, not a pie crust apron. Again, that similar hatch grain leather, which you can have available on these models as well. 5 violets. Also a derby with this collar along the apron that is accentuated by the shape and design of this side panel, and a similar back heel counter as the longwing Blucher that you can see here. These share this property right here, which I like about that. That makes this sort of a familiar design and shape. It's very robust suicide style heel, meaning that this didn't have any traction on it, so a little bit more slippery, and a full leather footbed with the 5 nail pattern. This model also is from the 1950s and 60s era of Florsheim, some of the highest quality construction at the time, with the higher stitch density adorning the edge of the outsole stitching. Just clean work, high quality leathers, all production made in the United States. So Florsheim really is the standard bearer for American footwear. You can obviously get high quality pairs, which you can use, restore, continue to wear. There's plenty of them on the market, so you don't have to have these be shelf queens. You can get them ready to wear again, and you can really have a great entry point into classic or heritage style footwear. If you happen to have a heritage style, vintage style wardrobe, these particular styles, because they're a little bit more voluminous and rounded, pair really, really well with those of you who might be boot enthusiasts out there. Florsheim is a great place to start just because the cost is great, material quality is incredible, and you can get these easily resold or just wear them as is, as I've done with this model and this model, or as I mentioned, resoling this model and this model. And you're not going to feel bad about doing those types of things to such models. You're going to get a lifetime of wear, and you can pass these along so the next person can get a lifetime of wear. So that is my Florsheim collection. The longwing Blucher, the model that you should really consider and entertain if you are interested in a low-cut derby style footwear. Look for the Royal Imperial stamp on the insole. They're typically fairly true to size. I think they run maybe slightly smaller than true to size, but also slightly bigger than, say, the Alden Berry Last, which these last are very comparable to. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.